And welcome to Barely Interesting. Today we are joined by Jess once again. Thank you for joining us
Hello.
again, Jess.
Thanks for having
And
me.
we have an interesting day today. Today is day 7 of the trial. We start with Michael Campbell. We move on to Erica. We got crime guy, so he says, a crime lab guy. We have Casey, and then we end with Mr. Washington. But the theme of today is rebut, refresh, and bolster when it is inappropriate. And that is what Gravely did just about the entire day today. It was so much we need to go over, and we only have 45 minutes, so we will get into it. We left off, by the way, last Friday. We left off with Michael Campbell on the stand, and then we played the 911 call from Zach after Michael Campbell showed up at his house. We played the 911 call from Michael Campbell. Why would you make a call saying, I just want to let you guys know we weren't threatening him? Seems a little sus.
It's a little dodgy. Why would you need to call the police dispatcher to say, well, I mean, I was there, but I definitely didn't threaten him. It's like an admission of guilt through the denial for whatever reason. If he didn't threaten him, then he wouldn't have had to call the police dispatcher to say it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing. And then so we start off day 7. We've got the continuation of the direct examination of Mike Campbell, and there's a lot of issues there with Mr. Campbell. And you get a sense from DA's questioning of Mr. Campbell that he's anticipating something. He's almost creating an alibi, if you will, or a defense for Michael Campbell.
Almost. Most definitely.
I was being a little sarcastic.
Almost. I mean, what you were saying is like setting up situations before the defense had even brought it in. For whatever reason, he felt like he was so threatened by Michael Campbell and the Denny motion brought with Michael Campbell that he absolutely needed to address almost line by line the issues in the Denny motion, including like things like that Michael Campbell shaved. And so they bring this up where they're asking him about his hairstyle. But if you read the Denny motion, it had nothing to do with him shaving his head. It had to do with shaving his beard, which was odd and out of place because he always had a beard to anyone that had known him. And that's why it was a thing that was notable during the week that Rosalio had disappeared. Why would he shave his beard that week? It's out of place. Why would a man who always sported a bald head and a beard suddenly go totally Q, like a cue ball? It doesn't add up. And then we have other issues that he's brought in with where he was at and when, and issues with his whereabouts, and even bringing up the last time that he was at Rosalio's house, which was, they talked about the pizza party, right? But they tried to make it this innocent thing, but nobody's ever identified what night of the week that was. And nobody's ever actually expressed exactly what transpired at the 1:42 a.m. visit that Michael Campbell made with Rosalio on the 17th. So in the very early morning hours of the 17th, that Sunday. So that was also brought up. It was just, why is he bringing all this in? It's not related to Zach at all.
It was confusing. The whole day was confusing. Mm-hmm. Jess, you watched it all. How many pages of notes did you take?
Handwritten 7, but typed out it's a little less than that. But on the lines of what Solon was saying that I thought was weird is a person that, not having the background and all that, whatever. Even on the first watch, this stood out as far as like the prosecutor going, did you not remember the conversation you had with Rosalio about owing money and only could recall later? Like totally feeding this guy what actually happened, or guiding him as to how to talk about it or phrase it himself. Like he was the leading that was going on. It was kind of embarrassing. It was gross.
Yeah, he actually got called out today for offering multiple choice options on a leading question. It's not your law school exam, sir. This is not one of your students. He doesn't know how. I'll say it again. He doesn't know how to try a case. He doesn't know how to ask a question. He literally gave him multiple choices today, and it was absolutely ridiculous. And then when the defense started doing the cross, it got even worse because they got objected to over and over and over for simply asking really relevant questions. But what did the state do? As they always do, they say, oh, that's a Denny issue. You can't do that because we addressed that and the Denny motion, and now it's improper and it's outside the scope.
Right.
And it was just all kinds of issues from the state today. They were all over the place trying to, like I say, rebut, refresh, and bolster their own witnesses at inappropriate times.
But we also have the moment where they get into a dispute. They're arguing back and forth about the information that they're presenting, because they're asking Campbell about, I think, John Hunt, and in that conversation, Nicole has to bring up to the judge that it's in the discovery that the state has. They're not ambushing the state with this information. This is someone that the state always had at their fingertips and never did anything with. And this sort of line of conversation or questioning is insane, that the state is trying to block evidence that they had in the discovery that they are familiar with. It's not like they were bringing in something new, which is the point of Denny, is that it's supposed to introduce new information to the prosecution. The prosecution is supposed to have time to gather evidence on the finger point accusation. It's the purpose is to give the state an opportunity to actually investigate this other potential actor. But that's not how it's used in this case. They intentionally use it to then roadblock and prevent a fair defense. And that is the problem with this.
Right. Next, we get Erica. We were done with Mike, right? So many witnesses, so much BS. So we get Erica Saylor. I'm going to say
We
Saylor.
didn't mention just the Denny motion was a circuitous argument, and so it was just that he was so thirsty to try and prove that he could try and give Michael Campbell an alibi, that his improper argument, his circuitous, self-defining argument in the Denny motion, he had to try and justify it through trying to give him an alibi, which is why we have Erica Saylor taking the stand.
Right.
She didn't know anything about Zach or the case at all, other than hearsay from other people. She didn't talk to Rosalia about anything that occurred. She had no idea.
What did Sadie tell Rosalio, who then told Mike, who then told you? That's literally where the questions were going.
Right.
I mean, I found her somewhat credible. I thought it was interesting. Okay, so Erica testifies that Mike was home with me that whole night, right? As a good alibi witness would, if you were a criminal defendant, which Mike wasn't or isn't. But she introduced two videos, or I shouldn't say she. Gravely did through her. Yeah. And the second video, which was supposed to be a video showing Michael Campbell there, didn't have a timestamp on it.
Right.
Awesome.
The first one had a timestamp. Oh, hey, look at us. We've got Chinese food or whatever, sushi for dinner.
Yeah.
The second one didn't have a timestamp. That's the one with Michael Campbell's face in it.
So it's worthless, right? I mean, ultimately, it should be.
Well, just, you know about being a good girlfriend, right? Or wife, you need
Sure.
to stand by and properly provide alibi testimony, regardless of the
Of course.
facts, right?
Yeah, but well.
I mean, other than that video, which they claim gave Campbell an alibi, which is still odd to present. This case had nothing to, it was totally irrelevant. Why is this coming into the trial? And they tried to argue against it because it's improper. It shouldn't be in this case at all. If Michael Campbell was on trial, I would understand presenting it, but he's not. So it doesn't make sense as to why then the state became Campbell's defense attorney by then presenting an alibi or a potential alibi for what he was up to during the alleged time of disappearance. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, that's not their job. They're supposed to prove, because they haven't been able to at all, right? And today we had the DNA analyst, and we're like, oh, maybe we'll see some evidence. Anyway, we'll get there. But like you said, they're acting like his defense attorney when everything should be focused on proving that Zach did it. And it's crazy to me.
So let me break this down, right? Okay, so we talked about, I mentioned it before, there's rebut, there's refresh, and there's bolstering. Okay. So rebuttal is when you call a witness to challenge another witness's testimony, right? Person A says this happened, person B says that happened. You call person B to, to rebut the testimony from person A. Refresh is when a witness lacks memory of something specific, but there's a document or a video or something else that could refresh their memory. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I remember now, and then could testify to it. They're not reading it, you're not introducing it, but you're refreshing their memory. And then there's bolstering, which is at some point will reach a cumulative standard, right? But you're bolstering it by saying, here's a couple of witnesses that all saw the same thing and they all say the same thing, right? So you're bolstering testimony. What he was trying to do is rebut anticipated defenses, refresh the witness's memory with a document after she said she remembered everything clearly, and then doing it all to bolster the previous witness's testimony, which none of it was done in the proper order. That's what Erica was there to do. Had nothing to do with Zach's case. And he felt the heat from the defense, so much so that he had to say this.
And Judge, I'm just going to request that that you limit each of our counsel tables to only having one attorney per witness render objections or make arguments. So I just fear we'll never get out of here if you allow both attorneys on either side or all three attorneys. We have 5 attorneys. I just would ask the court to make a simple request or perhaps an order indicating anytime there's going to be argument here on a particular witness, that one objects and one makes the legal rulings, and that we not go back and forth.
Well, I understand the time issue. But this is something that the rule exists principally for the protection of the poor reporter, and she's indicated thus far anyway it hasn't presented too much of a problem. Okay. So I'll leave it as is.
Those 3 defense attorneys were ganging up on me.
Which is ridiculous, because if you watch the objections, the speaking objections that Gravely has during this trial, the judge allows him to soapbox and proselytize about whatever topic that he wants for almost as long as he wants the entire trial, but constantly cuts Nicole off halfway through whatever point that she's trying to make and putting her down. He does it a lot in today's day of trial. It's an uncomfortable amount of times that he is interrupting Nicole as the defense attorney and basically telling the jury that she doesn't know what she's talking about. Sit down, let the men talk. And that exchange is prejudicial to the jury as well in the decision that they make.
Well, on that one, I was thinking, watching it happen, because they were just going back and forth, having the conversation. She couldn't say anything. He seemed irritated, and he was really short with her. He inferred some, like she had some underhanded methods, or she was trying to be evasive or something. He used something that's clearly a negative word, and he snapped at her, cut her off. But what I was thinking about when he was going back and forth with Gravely so much, and Gravely, to me, came across like people that take care of senile elderly patients. He's like, oh, and he's kind of like sycophantic about it, right? So he's like, oh, the court said this, and he's like guiding the judge, right? Mm-hmm. And the judge, to me, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I said. Like, it's just, it seemed like he was Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, Gravely, in that dynamic. He seemed
That's
creepy.
A great analogy, Littlefinger.
It's true, yeah.
And he has little fingers.
And he's got soft hands. And I know because I shook his hand. That's firsthand account. His hands are very soft, uncomfortably soft, actually.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, that was the whole point of Erica. She was there to rebut, bolster, and refute testimony or anticipated testimony, all out of order. All out of order. It was ridiculous. Then we get into Ronald Wittucky.
Ron Wittucky, also known as Bill Nye, as the chat called him when the trial was live. They called him the Bill Nye, the lab tech guy. So we have Ron Wittucky. Ron, there is an interesting thing about Ron, and Gravely tries to manipulate Ron. Ron is trying to hold true to the science. and Gravely is really trying to get him to express an opinion. And it's a question that he keeps pushing for, and he keeps pushing for that degree of scientific certainty, which has no definition in science. It's ridiculous.
Right.
But he's like trying to push for him to confirm Lisa Treffinger's opinion, but Ron keeps saying, I confirmed her report, her written report. And
Right.
that is different than what Gravely was trying to sell the jury.
Yeah, he was really asking him to verify her testimony that it was in fact blood in the car. And that was nowhere contained in her report. So Nicole was good and pushed back on that to the point where the judge wouldn't allow him to offer an opinion as to that based on her report. However, the judge allowed him to pontificate on whether or not it was blood. He made the basis of saying, well, it appeared to be blood because of the DNA results that they got and photographs. And he was like, it looked like blood. And then Gravely doubled down at the end. It's like to a degree of medical certainty or scientific certainty. And he's like, sure. Okay. But it took him a long time to get there.
Yeah.
Because
He
I don't
really
feel
had
like
to
he was
leverage.
comfortable saying that.
And it was clear that he was not comfortable saying that. But Gravely was really, really trying to get him to express an opinion about it, because he already got that to work with Treffinger to try and get around the written report that she provided, which did not identify it as blood, was clearly not identified as blood in her written report.
Right. And in fact, there was an email to the contrary as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But that was the big fight there. It kind of sort of won. Then he pontificated in front of the jury, and he's really likable, and he explains things. Unlike Lisa, that was just all over the place. I don't know what the hell she was saying. He actually could explain things. It was unfortunate the way that he explained the spot, but he was at least able to offer some sort of coherent thought, I guess.
I mean, in his defense, he was analyzing it through photographs and through the written report. So, all he's looking at is the data, the report that's handed to him for him to review and say, okay, this looks like it makes sense. And he stamps it with his stamp of approval.
This is the one place where a defense expert really could have helped. Not only because they could testify in opposition to it, but they will educate the attorneys. Like, I don't know what my, the science behind the things that my experts testify to. I rely on them to help formulate the cross-examination. And if there was a DNA expert for the defense, I feel like they could have used that person to say, okay, you're telling us that the DNA is more consistent with that you would find in blood as opposed to, say, skin cell or semen or anything like that. But it could be those things. You're basing that off of the color, which you don't even know if the color came from the material that you tested, right? So that question wasn't really asked, and I would have liked to have seen that asked. I don't know. Jess, what did you think after his testimony? Are you convinced that this is Rosalio's blood?
It gave me flashbacks of closing arguments, and I haven't even rewatched that in a long time. But what I do remember is the could have happened, might have happened. It's like you're saying that out loud in your argument to convict this guy of the worst thing ever. And everything is could it be? Would it be? It's not definitively this thing. It's like, yeah, I was having flashbacks to closing, but
the other thing that you were I just thought of when you were talking is that he introduced a lot of blood from the apartment, blood from the couch, blood from the floor. It was like, did you test this swab? Yes, I tested it. It was blood. It was Rosalio's. Nothing that the defense is going to contest. They're not contesting that all this blood in the apartment is Rosalio's, but he goes through 6 or 8 swabs in different locations and said, yep, that's blood and it's Rosalio's. Yep, that's blood and it's Rosalio. Oh, that spot in the back of the van. Yep, that's blood and it's Rosalio. You just sort of, it's like those little mind games you play with people, right?
But the thing is that what he does, he mixes the location back and forth between the house and the crime scene, and he does it on purpose.
Zach's pants too.
Right. So
Yeah.
he lists the pants, he lists the crime scene, he goes back to something innocuous, and he goes back to the crime scene, and he's going back and forth. And that is intentional, because
Oh yeah.
the goal is to try and get the jury to maybe misremember that there was blood in a location that it wasn't, because he's like talking about all the locations that it was, and he's adding these things where it wasn't into the group of things that did test for Rosalio's DNA.
The fire hose of information, so that they can't pinpoint, like, what actually happened. They think they can come away with a bit of a, okay, I get the gist, right? I mean, that's the end goal, right?
Yeah. You're just kind of mixing and matching, and then the details get lost. You can't see the tree for the forest kind of thing, right? So that's what you end up getting, and that's why the jury's sitting there like, oh, it's blood, it's his, it's that's DNA, Zach's. I don't know what came where, but he's telling me that all the DNA matches. That's how they got the conviction. It was that guy. That's how they got the conviction.
That's wild.
Now, again, Monday morning, quarterbacking it. Maybe you bring up, as a defense, you bring up a chart, right? And you put a line down through the middle. And you say, okay, you confirmed this DNA was from here, and that's Rosalio's, but it's all his blood that was found in the apartment. And then you confirmed all of Zach's DNA, and it's all here. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that's in dispute is this one little speck, and that's on the line. Maybe you can do it that way and break it up so it's not the fire hose, like Jess says. You're kind of strategically spraying it.
We actually have that on freezachariahanderson.org. So if you go to our website, we have a lot of those results all listed out and what the results are. And
I'm just saying, as a defense attorney in the trial.
Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest weaknesses. One, they didn't show the map. They didn't show the drive time. They didn't show that breakdown of all of the things that they tested that had no evidentiary value, all like this pile. Because there was it the Crumbly case where she printed out all the text messages or whatever and had that massive stack.
Josie, who's doing the Wrongful podcast, like, he got me. I had to go back and re-listen.
It's one of those things where there's so much there that the visual effect of having it there leaves an impression with the jury, and there just wasn't any of that. There was no map of Sadie's house, so you could see why OA's testimony didn't make sense. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's none of those things that were provided to the jury that they could have provided to the jury, even in closing arguments, that would have made these very confusing, very dense pieces of testimony make more sense.
Yeah, timelines and maps, those visuals do wonders for helping somebody understand a story, and without having to constantly write down in their book, because they do have notepads, but they can't constantly be in it trying to keep up with the the attorneys that are talking. So having that visual prompt, it's like, okay, they can make sense of what they've heard, put the pieces where they are supposed to be and when they're supposed to be, versus just, I can remember this. It's like, you don't trust a waitress to remember your order. You think you're going to remember like all these intricate
details. I get nervous when a waitress isn't writing down my order.
I don't like it.
That she's going to screw something up.
All right, so let's move on to our next our next witness. We have Cassie Remsburg.
She's interesting. She not interesting because of her, but it's interesting that they called her. Again, our theme here is rebut, refresh, and bolster. And she's the sister of Zach's then girlfriend, and she's called to rebut the state's own witness. So the state's own witness is what's her
Christine.
Her sister
Yeah.
is
So
Christine.
So the state's one of the state's earlier witnesses, witness 3 is Christine, Zach's girlfriend. And apparently the state didn't like the way she testified, so they brought in another witness to rebut their own witness, which is a bit odd, a bit unorthodox, and a bit probably shouldn't have been allowed, because you're usually not allowed to, unless you call the witness that's hostile, which she wasn't ever declared hostile. You really can't rebut your own witness. You ask the questions you asked, you got the answers you got, and you move on. So that was interesting, but I didn't hear any objections about specifically calling her. Did you guys?
No.
No, I don't recall any objection to it.
Maybe it was off screen or something. I don't know, but yeah, I just didn't hear any objections to calling her because she had nothing to offer other than an additional bolstering of the idea that Zach wasn't at her house the night that Rosalio supposedly was attacked and unalived.
Which was known and confirmed with the
Right.
other testimony. So it wasn't even necessary.
That
So
wasn't even dispute at all,
right.
from
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah, so it's
It's-
supposed to bolster an agreed upon fact. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't see the need for her other than, they could have made an argument that it was cumulative. You've had cell phone testimony. Have we had the cell phone testimony yet? Maybe
No.
not. No, we haven't
Mhm.
had the cell phone yet.
No.
Okay, but we know cell phone is coming, right? We know cell phone data is coming. We have
They did mention cell
Zach's
phones.
girlfriend.
They did mention pings,
Yeah,
but
they've
they
talked
didn't
about
really
some
go
of it.
into the cell phone.
Well,
evidence.
they talked about it with Michael Campbell.
Oh, Campbell.
A little bit.
Because and
yeah.
that was outside of the jury's
Oh.
presence.
That
Do you
the
wanna go back?
statement by the judge during that discussion of the location of Michael Campbell's phone was totally improper. The judge inserts himself as a pseudo witness where he talks
Yeah.
about his phone pinging in Michigan. What the hell is he talking about?
Was that in front of the jury?
I don't
I can't
recall.
remember. There was so much. That was the other
Difference.
thing too I noticed today finally is that, there's so much information that we got watching the trial. I was getting a little lost as to whether or not the jury was in the room for some of this stuff. And so, because they were in and out constantly today. And so I'm like, wait a minute, they're talking about all this. Is this in front of the jury? Was that in front of the jury?
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, I'm listening to it all. I'm like, this is all ridiculous. How could you? There's not enough here if they're scraping the bottom of the barrel with this sort of evidence. But I don't know if the jury heard it all. Particularly
On
when
that
they're
particular moment, the jury was dismissed for lunch and they continued on. So the jury was not present for that pinging comment.
Jess
Okay.
with the save in her notes. Nice work.
I did a thing.
All right. Jen is usually my resident expert when I have fuzzy memory about something. She corrects me 99% of the time.
But Cassie didn't really offer anything else other than that Zach wasn't there, and that her sister's driving Zach's normal vehicle. I forget what it is, and Zach's driving around the van.
The Audi, yeah, that
Audi, yeah.
Christine was allowed to borrow the Audi to make it to work and stuff like that, but it's not like she was driving it full time. And there's questions about when she started driving it and when that accident happened, and they never actually established that. So they never established a timeline on when she had the car accident and Zach started letting her drive the Audi, because I don't think it was that many times. And up to that point, like Zach would go pick her up from work and drop her off at her apartment. And when I was working as a bartender, I used to just drop her off at home on my way home because I drove past her house before she got the car. Like that was a normal thing. Like she would catch a ride from someone or grab an Uber. Like that was not uncommon. So the fact that they're trying to assert that was her daily driver is not. It's a misrepresentation of the fact.
Yeah, That's totally how it comes across.
And well, it does. It came across, and my thought was, okay, so they got to link the van to Zach and somehow to Rosalio. That's all I got out of that. But otherwise, I didn't care. But I definitely did think that was her daily driver. Was Zach's car, at least at that time.
Right.
But again, at the same time, in the same day, Gravely is complaining about how much time this case is taking, right? And yet he calls this other witness, which and he calls Erica and Cassie. Both of them are non-essential witnesses.
Yeah,
he could have scrapped both of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that to like make Zach's case stronger. I'm trying to be objective that they're really not necessary.
To be fair, Eileen was also almost completely irrelevant, and most of what Celia had testified to, not relevant. I mean,
Celia, who's Celia?
Rosalio's mother. There was
Okay,
some
I'll push
things
back
that
on that because they have to prove life and they have to prove death.
look, we've gone into this a little bit, but there was a lot of prejudicial, irrelevant testimony from her, and I think that they could have done it with less of that emotional testimony. And I'm not saying that there wasn't relevant testimony from her, but they didn't need to get into half of the stuff they did.
That was on purpose, though. If it's emotional,
Yeah,
it helps them. That's all it was. So I mean,
100%.
actual, is this of value? Probably not, but it is valuable to the prosecutor.
Right.
You know,
I want to
the longer
address
they
this
can
real
make
quick.
people feel sad about. Oh,
We
yes.
normally we don't have a lot of time to address chat, but I want to say this. Rittenhouse won in spite of the judge. I noticed that again rewatching this and thinking, because originally I was thinking when I watched it the first time, I'm like, this was a good judge in Rittenhouse. And then I was watching and I was like, okay, I mean, Zach's not guilty, and this is, the judge is saying stuff to the jury that I think is helpful. It turned out to be like the worst thing that he could say. And then but then his rulings, like I was watching it somewhat passively. It was my first trial watch, and I was probably not as intently watching it as I would today. Rittenhouse won in spite of the judge, and that's all I got to say about that. I don't do names.
And he was twice the judge during Rittenhouse's trial than he was during Zach's trial. Legitimately, like if you watch him speak, he's at like almost half the speed. Like his cognition is clearly altered between Rittenhouse and Zach. And I mean, I'm not trying to tell you that Bruce Schrader didn't have times in his career where he was a respected judge. But the reality is that there were some cognitive issues. There's some barriers to him being judged.
Was he going into story time so much with the Rittenhouse trial as much as he did with this one? Because he sounded like a grandpa that was just like wandering off somewhere, like, buddy, reel it back in.
I have to rewatch the Rittenhouse case because I don't remember him doing that. I don't remember him just like a doddering old grandfather telling his
demented grandpa. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Then next we get into, I don't know why he's my favorite witness. He's the worst one out there, Mr. Washington.
Oh,
This guy. This is the most ridiculous witness I have seen in the cases that I've covered. I mean, there's been some bad expert witnesses that are really trying to like prove their job choice, but this guy, oh my God. Mr. Washington. Let's talk about Mr. Washington for a minute. He's a convicted felon who's facing more charges, but in exchange for a sweetheart deal, he's going to testify against Zach. And I feel like Gravely was all giddy like a schoolboy calling him to the stand. Is that the feeling you guys got watching this again?
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
So he's called
like, oh boy, we got him now. Like,
yeah.
It's
like there was a shift in his tone when he got on the stand.
So, Jess, what were your thoughts about Marquand? Like, I've complained about Marquand quite a bit and how absolutely ridiculous this testimony.
Wait. Say it to his face.
Yeah, you're a liar, sir. And you stole my brother's thumb drive with his discovery and much, much more. With your line of commentary about jumping on other people's cases to get out of your 10-year minimum sentence for your federal charges.
Wait, Solomon, I thought you asked Jess a question.
I did. I just was going. You asked me to say it to his face, so I was saying it to
I
his face.
wanted Jess to say it to his face.
All right. Oh, my bad.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous to have that person, and then they start off with, you have 6 convictions, and you're under you're not being charged by the state. It's federal crimes. Like, they're trying to distance themselves. Like, it's not us. Like, I don't know. It seemed so sketchy the entire time, and somewhere along the way when they were going back and forth, I don't know if the jury was present at that point, but Gravely, he was like, I knew my witness was going to be attacked. And it's like the words that he used, it's like, this is your witness? And they're trying to frame this guy as this totally upstanding, want to do good, reformed inmate, reformed like 6-time convicted criminal, and he's now this, I am going to do what's right, and I'm not going to lie because I know the penalties for lying. And then they're like, oh, are you going to be getting any benefit from doing this or testifying? Potentially. It's like, oh my gosh, it's just, the emperor has no clothes. Why are we even pretending this is like even reasonable to have this person on the stand? It was insulting, personally.
You know, I feel like if the jury is hanging their hat on the DNA, they could completely disregard this witness. But the idea that the state is able to call somebody like this is frustrating, because anyone who doesn't have blinders on, like Gravely and his staff, could see that this guy is just lying through his teeth. And worst yet, they tried to use this guy to admit other bad acts, other acts evidence against Zach, mainly the marijuana charge. They tried to question this guy in front of the jury about things that had nothing to do with the crime. Thankfully, the judge actually shut him down. Well, I don't know. We went into a whole bunch of arguments, and then he's like, "Yeah, we'll all sleep on it. We'll come back in the morning," because apparently he had an appointment. Yeah, so they didn't finish the argument actually, but they tried to introduce other acts evidence. Not only did they try to get this guy to say, was it today's episode with the mouthing, or is that today. Tomorrow? Was it today? Okay. I watched it so many times when I got to this guy. I skipped to the arguments, but yeah. So Gravely is mouthing the words. Now, there's something to be said. I put out a video months ago on this. Is he mouthing the words leading the witness, or is he mouthing the words because he knows exactly what the witness is going to say and he's saying it along with him? I don't know, but it's inappropriate either way. But it shows that throughout this entire case, the investigation, it was a baseball bat, right? That was the idea, or some sort of hard, blunt force object. And then all of a sudden it turns to a stabby because that's what this witness said. And much like the timeline and everything else, it changes when the witnesses change their story. Then he shifts his whole thing. Still Zach, it's not anybody else, but they shift their whole narrative because of these sort of insane statements that come out.
Yep.
They have no basis.
Look over there. We're gonna shift gears now because I don't like that. That's not gonna go well. So and the way that he goes about it, he acts as if it always was. The next way that he's describing it, it's like, wait, no, I have a memory of like yesterday, kind of. Yep. It was different yesterday, but every time he shifts gears and tries to change it, it's like, but on that, what I was getting at was that he acts like it always was the new thing. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, like he didn't say in opening statements that Rosalio's keys are still in the apartment. They never even showed that. That was not part of his roadmap. We made a point of emphasizing it, right? But we have no evidence of keys. Shoes are missing. Glasses are missing. Keys are missing, right? So even the work boots.
And they don't
missing.
They don't DNA test any of the knives.
Yeah, and they never test it. They don't test all of the items and that people were drinking out of.
They didn't test it because they didn't think it was a stabbing. They thought it was a beating, right?
Right.
So that's why they didn't test it. Now all of a sudden, there's new information.
Right.
The one thing is, why would Gravely think that he could get in other X evidence? Why? What would be his motivation? Oh, yes, our themes for today: to rebut, refresh, and bolster. Why do we need this other X evidence? Well, it's to bolster the credibility of Mr. Washington, because otherwise the jury's just left out there wondering, how is it that this man knows so much? Oh, well, they bonded over drug trafficking conversations or whatever.
Sure, Jan.
Yeah, money and drugs.
Money and drugs. They bonded over that, as prisoners are wont to do. And that's how he got so close to learn this information. And that's why you can trust him, because they bonded. What was the other? how long was this guy with Zach in the house?
5 weeks.
Like a month. Yeah.
Yeah, he
month,
said 5
okay.
weeks.
All right. Because it was undefined in the trial. Was it defined in 5 weeks in the
He
trial?
It was
said
defined.
he-
Yeah.
Yeah, he said
Okay.
5 weeks on the stand.
Yeah, they
But
give
what-
the dates.
So
I thought he
another
said like
thing-
sometime.
But it's also important to recognize that when they give the dates, that they also cite that it was like almost a year later before Marquand came forward to give the statement. So
Did he
so
come
like,
forward or was he approached?
exactly. So came forward. And
Right.
we had one of my absolute favorite moments in the entire trial today when John Birdsall turns and points at the prosecution and says, "These three people, the people at this table, these people were the ones that met with you with no recording and took your statement. These three people," and finger points at them, pointing them out as doing something that was dishonest. It was clearly dishonest. It was underhanded. They took his statement and then just gave them a little summary after meeting with him for an absurd amount of time. It was like an hour and a half or whatever it was. And so they meet with him for all of this time and they craft this narrative with him and they put it down. And then conveniently, we have Gravely mouthing simultaneously with die, and starting the third die.
So like David said, if it could be one of two things, right? He coached him, prepped him, or he had heard it so often he was, expecting it. But what that says to me is that he's excited about it. Like, like you start mouthing along to something, like you're ready for it. So
Right.
if it's the second, it's still bad to me. It looks bad.
He was so excited to get Mr. Washington on the stand. It was he was like, I don't know. He had a half chub or something going on. He was so excited.
Did he stand up at all?
No, he sat most
see?
of the day. Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
looking.
Rewatch.
No,
Were you
thank
allowed back in the courtroom for
I-
this day?
I was allowed in the courtroom for this day. Yeah.
Nice. Well, the other thing that I noticed is because now I'm looking in the background because I'm always trying to spot Solomon in the background. For a publicized trial that was all over law and crime and everything, there weren't a lot of people in that courtroom. I just thought that was interesting. But anyway, so that's what we have for today. Did we miss anything that we wanted to talk about? Remember, everyone, rehabilitate, refresh, and bolster. That's our themes for today.
Rebut, refresh,
Rebut.
bolster.
Refresh, rebut, refresh, and bolster.
and bolster.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was. It was, you could see him working the slimy angle. And this is just another echo of a bad man, a bad actor, someone that was knowingly trying to wiggle his way into a conviction, even though he actually had exonerating evidence for most of these charges, if not all of these charges, in the discovery. And it's uncomfortable to watch it all over again with more knowledge. Trust me. So tomorrow, who do we have tomorrow, David?
Oh, we have Mr. Washington is coming back to grace us with his presence. Then we have
fun.
Caleb Petty. And then we have Caleb Petty, we have Susan Brown, and
Andrew Schultz.
Andrew Schultz. Yeah. Oh, Andrew Schultz. That's
So
right.
honestly, like two of the most credible witnesses that the state actually put on the stand, literally two of the most credible, was Susan Brown Williamson and then Andrew Schultz. I think that they were honestly giving their genuine recollection of their memory of the situation. Again, 33 months later, Andrew didn't remember the color of the car or the van correctly. But we're going to go into that tomorrow. So tomorrow, our guest,
Who's our guest tomorrow?
Andrew Schultz.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Andrew's going
I
to come
couldn't
on
remember.
tomorrow.
Yes, one of the witnesses is coming on tomorrow. That's going to be great. and highly entertaining. And then Wednesday, I can't remember. I was trying
Crime
to think of
Spies is going to join us for Sadie on Wednesday, so we'll
Yes.
we'll talk a little bit more of that at the end of the day tomorrow. But tomorrow, Andrew's going to talk about a little bit of his experience and really his perspective on what transpired during the trial. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting. So look forward to that tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. We will be restreaming again day 8. So check that out in preparation for tomorrow night's Barely Interesting. And thank you very much, Jess, for joining us.
Thanks
And
for having me. It's always a good
see
time.
you guys next time.
I mean, it's frustrating, but you're great. Love you guys.
Bye.